Welcome back to Dead Good Book Reviews. I'm Judith and you are watching another review recap of another book in the Animorphs series. Today we are talking about Animorphs 25, The Extreme, and this cover sure is an extreme look at what happens when you try to photo manipulate a small boy into a polar bear. We're back at another Marco book, so everyone brace yourselves. It is worth saying this is the first, as far as I'm aware, the first book we've got to that has been ghost written, so thank you to Jeffrey, I'm going to say Zulke? Possibly, a prolific author who seems to mainly have written books about various different modes of transportation for children to read. This was written based on K.A. Applegate's outline, however, so we're not necessarily going to blame Jeffrey for what we're about to receive. Somewhat traditional Animorphs opening, slightly interrupted by Marco telling us that he has a date with Marion, a girl who has long black hair, deep dark eyes, and dimples that make me want to cry every time she smiles. She's also nearly as smart, charming, and charismatic as I am. Okie dokie there, my guy. So Marion and Marco have bonded over their apparent joint love of classical music, and Marion has invited him to go and hear Beethoven at a concert that weekend. Of course, Marco has never heard of Beethoven, but he lies convincingly enough to give Marion an idea that he knows what he's talking about, and she gives him her number. So after that intro, Marco gives us the lowdown that for a normal kid this would be fantastic, but of course when you're constantly at threat of being found out by a shape-stealing evil alien species, this might not be ideal. So of course Marco's second thought after thinking about Marion's dimples is she a controller? Sure, I might not mind being Marion's slave, but being a Yeerk slave is a different story. The less said there, the better. But one date can't hurt, right? So we cut to the day after the big date, and suffice to say Marco was not an amazing first date partner, having fallen asleep during the music. After I failed in a bold attempt to escape during intermission, we went back in and the orchestra started to play again. And they played and played, and I considered yelling fire just to get out of the place. And when I woke up, everyone was gone, including Marion. And Cassie is a good friend, I guess? Not to Marion, but definitely to Marco, and says they're pretty convinced she's not his type anyway. And that's partly because they've been doing surveillance on her for the last 3 days. Pretty sure she's not a controller, also pretty confident she's not Marco's one. But before Marco can say, hey guys, this is kind of meddling in my love life, who should show up but Eric the Chi to drop some plot. Now I could put a big fancy recap on who the Chi are here, but I'm just going to point you back to the video for book 10 and we'll move on. Eric extends his hologram projection so no one will know that they're having a conversation, so that he can tell us that sweet plot info. Our sources tell us the Yeerks have been trying to develop a way to broadcast Kandrona rays using human satellite technology, Eric told us. They seem to have found some place on this planet isolated enough to allow them to erect a satellite station without interference. If they're successful, they could turn every backyard swimming pool in the world into a Yeerk pool. Suffice to say, this would not be good. And on top of that, even Eric knows about Marco's failed date. He even helped out with the surveillance. Talk about embarrassing. She wasn't your type anyway, Eric said. She had taste in music. Oh, so you're a big Beethoven fan? Eric nodded his android head. I was the maestro's valet for quite a few years. He was an awful person, but he made music my masters would have wept to hear. I don't have time to dig into that. What do we do when we get new information about a Yeerk scheme? We meet in the barn, of course. Eric is there to give them some more sweet information, including the fact that they don't know where this facility is, but they know Visser 3 will be visiting it soon. And they have found the location of Visser 3's new feeding pasture, which is where he's headed tomorrow. So to be clear, the schedule is the Visser is going to go and have a quick snack, which he obviously eats through his feet. We know this, we've read the books. And then he's going to be picked up in his bug fighter to go and see the new facility. The plan seems to be to fly out to the feeding pasture and then kind of hitch a ride onto the bug fighter, which seems like a pretty decent plan. Even Cassie thinks so. I would trust Cassie with my life. Tobias does raise the issue that they don't know where this facility is, they don't know how far away it is, and while he, the Hawk, can vanish for a few days and nobody's going to mind, everyone else has people who care about them and might be interested in knowing where they are. And so Eric shares his wonderful idea, which is that the Chi will change their holograms to project the Animorphs and take the place of the Animorphs for a good few days. It's as good a solution as any, so the plan's agreed, and the next day they hop into their bird morphs and fly off to catch Visser 3 having his breakfast. Sure enough, they get to the location and Visser 3's there in Andalite form, munching away with some guards, human and Hawk Bajir in the tree line as well. They each land separately so as not to draw too much attention to themselves while Tobias stands guard, or flies guard, I guess. Marco flies down and lands beneath a tree so he can demorph without being spotted by Visser 3. And if you are playing our unofficial Animorphs drinking game at home, you'll be sure to take a sip as it's time to morph small. Fly, to be precise. 5 minutes until our Visser's interstellar Uber arrives, so our squadron of flies set off. We buzzed our crazy fly wings and bobbled and weaved and wallowed towards a vague blob of blue fur and bad attitude. I just like that sentence. Everyone else manages to hop on board the Visser no problem, but Marco ends up stuck under the Visser's hand, not because he wanted to slap Marco, although I would understand that if he did, but because he had an itch on his butt. At that very moment, the bug fighter arrives, and so Marco flies in after the Visser and goes into his underbelly fluff. Ax, our helpful alien friend, listens in to the Taxxons explaining the journey, and turns out this is going to be about 3.5 hours, which is going to be a problem for our Animorphs, who obviously will have to demorph after 2. Demorph in a bug fighter, full of Taxxons, and Hawk-Bashir, and Visser 3 himself. Any idea of our destination? Jake asked. The navigator did not say. I will, however, do my best to gauge our direction as we go along. They'd be screwed without Ax, honestly. The bug fighter docks with the blade ship, which is a good thing because there's bound to be a bit more space in there where they can hide and demorph. Have I mentioned that I hate this morph, Tobias added? I mean, I'm finding myself very attracted to the Visser's sweat. How sick is that? Yeah, Cassie agreed, he stinks, but to my fly brain, he actually smells kind of good. Andalite, the unisex fragrance from Animorphs. Having avoided another itching incident, which sounds much more unpleasant than it is, or maybe it is that unpleasant, I don't know, Ax listens in to the Taxxons again. Not great, they're speaking Gallard, which Ax doesn't speak that well, but it's better than nothing. Are all the Venba on board, Visser 3 growled. Venba? Ax asked excitedly. He did say Venba, did he not? And so, for the next hour, they hang out upside down on the Visser's belly hair and try not to get too nervous. They're basically in Visser 3's private rooms on the blade ship. There were various things hanging from the walls, like art. Some were large and elaborate, made of steel or something like steel. Some had electrical probes. Some had teeth or spikes or saws. We had an idea they might be instruments of torture collected from around the galaxy. I suspect that this was learned in Evil Villain Interior Design class. The simple plan would be to wait till the Visser leaves, demorph, remorph, everything's fine and dandy, but he seems pretty comfy and not planning on heading off anywhere, so it's time for plan B. With 20 minutes left until it's time to demorph or be stuck as flies forever, they really need to go for the jugular. Ax bellows in a thought-speak impression of Visser 3 to the guards outside the door, so he calls for them to come in. What are you doing, fool? Visser 3 shouted at the Hawk-Bashir. What is the meaning of this interruption? Drink called him a fool. They do this again, and a different Hawk-Bashir enters. Visser 3 dispatches that Hawk-Bashir with his tail, so we won't dwell too much on that for now. The third time that they do this, calling a Hawk-Bashir in, is enough for Visser 3 to get cross enough to leave the room, bringing the Animorphs with him. So they abandon his belly hair, land on the ground, and begin to demorph. Marco's eyes are actually the first thing to demorph in this situation, which gives us an unpleasant view of the others morphing, but does tell us that Hawk-Bashir on the ground will probably live. Their luck runs out though as they're halfway through the remorph when a Taxxon walks in, presumably having been sent to deal with this injured Hawk-Bashir. It looks pretty terrified and confused at seeing an Andalite in there, so they quickly tell Ax that he needs to impersonate the Visser. So he does that, but the Taxxon didn't reply. He wasn't fooled. He was motoring back out the door, and that couldn't happen. Ax's tail comes into play now, and he slices the Taxxon in half, where it immediately begins eating itself, because yay, Taxxons. With the helpful instruction of nobody panic, Jake tells them all to remorph and hug the ceiling. As they fly out, heading for the aft of the ship where the storage bays will be, they spot Visser 3 coming back the other way. Guards! A moment's hesitation as he put it all together. Then, the Andalite bandits! They are on board! Well, the element of surprise was good while it lasted. They managed to make their way to the storage bays, though there is a slight risk that given that the Yeerks know about the insect morphs, they could just flood the storage bays with insecticide. Nobody wants to die as a bug, so time to demorph again. Again, assuming that there is zero video surveillance on this spaceship. Big assumption there. In demorphing, they realise that the cargo bay is full of these strange cylinders that inside have these strange silver kind of bodies in them. They look almost like... Ax began. Like what? I demanded. I was going to say they look like the Venba Visser 3 mentioned, Ax said. But they cannot be. Ax lets us know that the Venba are an alien race from a frozen moon that definitely went extinct a very long time ago. Ax notices the ship descending, so no time to dwell on this particular plot point. We need to get out of here. Time to go into our powerful morphs. Doors all around them dramatically open, revealing a dozen or so Hawk-Bashir who I do not think are here to perform a catchy song and dance number. But Visser 3's flair for the evilly dramatic does not fail us, and he begins his evil speech with, "Well, well, well. Here aboard my own ship, like you can't not do the shoulders. How nice of you to come around to see me. Can I offer you anything? Something to drink, to eat, or maybe just a quick death?" Oh, he's fabulous. Every time I think he can't get any more cartoonish, he just does. Marco notes that only 3 of the 4 doors surrounding them have opened. The one behind them probably leads to the outside, but Ax says they do not have the security codes. Jake bases his plan of attack/defense/escape on the fact that the Yeerks are unlikely to want to shoot the canisters. Rachel gonna slam into the nearest canister. Marco's going for the door, with Ax as backup, and the others are going straight for Visser 3. It's much easier to strategize when you're telepathic, isn't it? Battle ensues, during which one of the cylinders is shattered and this kind of mist comes out, out and everything it touches freezes, including the Hawkbajir, because it wouldn't be Animorphs with just like a little bit of body horror. Visser 3 realises too late what's happening and calls for the ship to go up, stop going down. They manage to open the hull door and revealing the whiteness of whatever landscape they are in. And one by one the Animorphs escape the quickly freezing interior spaceship to the currently freezing outside of the spaceship. Visser 3 would follow them, but by this point his minions on the control deck have heard him say up, so he's flying up and there's nothing he can do about it. Oh well, foiled again. I assume he says foiled again. They all need to demorph and then remorph into something that has a little bit more fur to it, because in case you hadn't realised, they've landed somewhere very cold. Could be Alaska, could be anywhere cold really, just like not Hawaii. We're not in Hawaii. Tobias flies up and with his hawk vision spots some kind of town or base nearby. They see the blade ship heading towards it. This is presumably this Visser 3 base that Chi have mentioned. Axe, Cassie asked, how are you holding up? I'm holding nothing up, he said, but I am slowly freezing to death. I doubt I can maintain brain function for more than a few minutes. I can really relate to being freezing cold, but not wanting to really mention it to anyone or really be a bother. Like, that speaks to me. Everyone is far too cold to cope unless you are Rachel, who is currently a bear. Tobias and Axe in their normal forms, I don't know why they must not have a morph that will work, unsure, are too cold to function, so they decide to more flee and hide inside of Rachel the grizzly bear's fur. Even those with cold weather semi-appropriate morphs, like big cats, wolves, etc., are struggling. They need to find shelter and they need to find it fast. Marco almost goes into the light, which would make this a very different turning point for the series, but Cassie slaps him with her wolf paw and snaps him out of it. Marco needs to morph to wolf. It's the best morph for this climate that they have. Cassie and Jake demorph and join him, thus resetting the 2-hour timer for those of you who are keeping track of that. Wolf is an okay morph for this climate. It's not ideal, so best not to plan to do any big combat scenes, which I'm sure will not come up. Now in less danger of imminent death, they actually spot 2 creatures coming towards them, very similar to those things they saw in the cylinders. Big, burly, nasty-looking beasts, silver with flashes of blood red and midnight blue along their flanks, along their shoulders and converging in their faces. I'd seen that colour scheme before. They were sliding towards us on long, ski-like feet. They used 2 of their forearms, one right and one left, to propel themselves forward, and they glistened in the light like diamonds or crystals. And they're each carrying a tube of some kind. Mystery tube. Probably not Pringles. Either these are the not-so-extinct Venba, or somebody has made a very convincing Halloween costume. The Venba appear to be using a sophisticated form of echolocation to spy out the Animorphs, who are pretty obviously not meant to be here. What Axe can tell us about the Venba, if this is indeed them, is that their temperature is so cool, even on the inside, that a Yeerk could not live inside them. So either the Yeerks have found a way to survive in the extreme cold inside of Venba's head, or they're controlling them in some other way. This will surely not be a plot point later on. And as the Venba approach, we learn what those strange tubes are. Why, they're Draken Beam cannons, of course. Capable of turning the solid rock uphill from them into gravel. Yay! With 20 minutes left on the remorph countdown, and the Venba seemingly out of sight, they stop in a rocky alcove to remorph, demorph and then remorph. They head on off in their quest to find either shelter or a cold weather morph, and the Venba are definitely still following them. As the sun sets, they catch the scent of another creature. Cassie spots it first. We knew this going in from the cover, but they've spotted a polar bear, which helpfully places us in the Arctic and not the Antarctic, because Arctic means bears and Antarctic is no bears. I know this. Things were looking pretty hopeless. Polar bear to the right of us, Venba behind us, and cold all around. That's a version of the Clowns to the Left of Me song that I've never heard before. With no other good options, they decide to just sort of dig themselves a big snow hole and wait it out. They take it in turns, keeping a nose out for the Venba, who probably can't find them. They're underground enough that the echolocation's not going to work. Marco takes advantage of the fact that he's probably not going to get any sleep tonight and asks Axe about the Venba. To cut a short story even shorter for the sake of YouTube, the Venba were a non-carbon-based life form who lived on a different planet and were discovered by a non-Andalite race called the Five, which does sound like a YA series from back in the heyday. It was like I Am Number 4 or something. Not to do with that, but just struck a chord with me. The Five were big meanies, however. It turns out if you melt down a Venba, which is very easy to do, they melt in any temperature below freezing, above freezing. I can do temperatures. They become a very handy fuel for these primitive computers the Five would be using. They basically eradicated the Venba using them for fuel, and the one saving grace in the situation is Axe assures us that the Five are no longer around. Yeah, I don't believe it either, but we'll see. Axe's theory is that the Yeerks somehow got hold of some Venba DNA and grew themselves some icy boys. The way they did this was creating a kind of Venba hybrid. probably using human DNA. Anyway, morphing ability is basically the only reason they survive the night, because it's quite handy to be able to reset your genetic code every now and then, grow back those fingers you've lost to frostbite. But morning finally comes, and in the dawn light they watch the polar bear do some hunting, which is pretty graphic, but you know, nature. And as gross as it is, they're getting kind of hungry. There's a small interlude where the best way I can explain it is that they ask Cassie for permission to go and eat some of the seal, or to perhaps hunt a seal of their own, because Cassie is pro-animals. This makes Cassie kind of angry because she doesn't really like the implication that she would rather her friends die in the cold than eat a seal that is already dead. She's not that intense, is her opinion. Anyway, it all works out. They distract themselves from the fact they're eating polar bear leftovers, as in the leftovers the polar bear has left, not eating a polar bear. It makes sense. And they chat about where they might be. They could be in Greenland, Alaska, Canada. There are options. So now we've dealt with surviving the night, not starving to death. It's time to find a cold weather morph. And who's available but the seal pups of the seal mother that the Animorphs just ate? Jeffrey, are you okay? This is very intense, even for an Animorphs book. They managed to snag a seal pup and very chillily acquire its DNA. Nature, huh? Rachel said. Poignant. Marco morphs baby seal and is revelling in finally being warm. We all know that feeling when you finally your body kicks in, you get a bit warmer, it's very pleasant. But just to ruin it, the Venber have found them again, and they've still got cannons. The fact that they are firing at seal pups probably means they saw the Animorphs morph, which adds a whole other layer of complication here. The Venber really can't be allowed to get back to the base and tell the Yeerks that these are in fact humans. They swim back towards the Yeerk base, following vaguely the original plan of get to the base and see what's going on, now with the added faff of don't let the Venber get back or they'll reveal all our secrets. There is a way to ensure that these Venber do not connect with the Yeerks, Axe pointed out. Destroy the Yeerk base. I mean, it's an idea. I don't have any better ones at this point. But who should show up just to add some extra escalating peril to the mix? Why, it's a killer whale, of course. They manage to get onto the surface, but the orcas are cracking the ice trying to kill the Animorphs. Time to demorph back to human on the grounds that a killer whale in hunting mode probably won't want to eat a human anyway. I guess. Is this just the absolute armpit of the universe? I demanded. Ask him, Rachel said. Only then did I notice that everyone was not staring at me, but past me. I turned, and I said, Hi, no offence about the armpit thing and all. None taken, he said. Who is he? Why, he's a man out on his fishing boat, just witnessing what must have been the weirdest thing he's seen all week. I would hope. Later it's confirmed in the book that this man is Inuit, and he believes the Animorphs are animal spirits at this point. And they go along with it because that's easier than explaining what's actually going on here and now. The good thing is that he hasn't recognised Axe in Andalite form, which means he's probably not a controller, or if he is, he's an incredibly good actor. So our man who is named Derek is a sealskin seller, but alas, a lot of his sealskins have been burned by those Star Trek guys, the Yeerks in their base. Reflecting that these Star Trek guys' behaviour must have upset these animal spirits, Marco confesses, actually, you know what, we're humans with morphing powers, this guy's an alien, here's what's happening. The guy smiled. His expression hardened. He didn't like not getting answers. You have something to do with the station they're building, with those big ice creatures, with the spaceships. Good thing Derek's so observant, eh? And Derek is concerned that his friend Nanook is going to get caught up in the whole business. Nanook is the polar bear. Full circle. I'm not hunting him, tracking him. Nanook's my buddy, known him since I was a kid. Well, here's a really insane question, I said brightly. Do you think we could pet him? We knew it was coming, but I still think this is cool because if I was a kid, and when I was a kid, one of the creatures I really wanted to hang out with and be was a polar bear. I just thought they were cool. I had a polar bear rug. Oh, it was great. Not real polar bear. It was made of yarn. Rachel morphs Grizzly and takes on the bear because obviously they've got to get him first. It's not going super well, so Marco morphs Gorilla to help. Tobias in hawk form swoops down and acquires Nanook, which obviously calms him down because acquiring an animal's DNA, they get very chill and everyone else can demorph and acquire the DNA as well. If you are planning on reading this book, I found it really interesting learning some of the ways that polar bears are adapted to their environment. I just think it's cool. Again, they're cool animals. This is just a great quote from Marco. We sauntered back towards the Yeerk base with the cockiness of Clint Eastwood going into the town saloon. Why would a polar bear in a saloon? That doesn't connect for me. Okay, fine. At this point in my notes I've written, there's not much left of this book. I'm sensing a two-parter in the works. I was genuinely sure this would be 2 parts. They spy the Yeerk base in the distance, though the mist is starting to kick up now, and there are Venba working on various projects around the base. They need to stay out of their way for now and work on what they do with them in the future. Thankfully, it seems unlikely Visser 3 is here currently, as there seems to be no good place to park a blade ship. The Venba can see them. They know there are bears out on the ice. Does that mean they're going to sound the alarm? There's only one way to find out, and that's to get closer. And they start sneaking through the Venba, and they don't seem to be noticing anything until one of the doors opens. And a human controller comes through the door and sees 6 massive polar bears in the middle of the base. She screams, as one would, "Alarm!" That's not what you'd say, sound the alarm, but she just screams alarm. They run past the Venba, past somebody else, another human controller, screaming Andalites in morph. Just so we know this is a legit Yeerk operation. They hear the man in charge saying, we need to reprogram the Venba, which gives us a clue as to how they're being controlled. Marco hasn't figured that out yet, but Axe is on the ball and relays the information. So, presumably with somebody clicking a button in an office somewhere, the Venba go into fight mode. And Marco knocks one of the Venba through the wall of the hangar into the presumably heated room, and the Venba immediately starts to melt. Silent, ghastly, he writhed. The lower half of his body was already a spreading pool of viscous liquid. A powerful smell hit us, like chlorine or something. Again, I must ask, Jeffrey, are you okay? Do we need to hold some kind of check-in with Jeffrey? They walk through the puddle of Venba, leaving Marco with a chemical tingling on his paws. Lovely. The human controllers are no threat to a polar bear, and the Venba keep walking into the hangar because they're being programmed to and immediately melting, so that's not really an issue. They came at us, leaping through the gap, slowing, stumbling, falling, melting. Everyone but Marco and Cassie has made it onto the nearest bug fighter. Marco and Cassie are transfixed by what's going on before them. We waited till all 8 of the Venba at the base had destroyed themselves. I don't know why. With all the danger, all the terror, someone still needed to be a witness. Somebody needed to be able to tell the world someday about this Yeerk atrocity. They're demorphing and Axe takes the flight controls. Marco offers to take on the weapons. He destroys the other bug fighter, then the dish, then gradually destroys all the buildings of the base. As they start to get away, they get probed, but like in a spaceshipy kind of way, and there's another spaceship after them, presumably Visser 3's blade ship, and it is much faster than them and will definitely beat them home. They manage to get away by the ingenious scheme of ejector seating out of the spaceship and morphing into birds of prey, which Visser 3 does not notice. And they spend the next 2 days flying, hiding in trains and trucks, and eventually making it home. Once, as we floated high on a wonderful warm thermal, we talked about the Venba. There were still 2 who might be alive, wandering the frozen Arctic. They might even know that the creatures they chased were human. A loose end. But the Venba wouldn't be heading south to civilization anytime soon. Yay? I guess. They get home, swap places with their Chi counterparts. Marco's dad remarks that Marco's been keeping his room exceptionally clean in a way that he wasn't ever doing before, so the Chi haven't done a great impersonation. And then it kind of ends. Marion never called Marco. There we go. It's an odd ending to a book, and I think that's why I so felt like it was going to be a 2-parter, because I felt like there was so much to cover. But no, just one and done. Not a lot of like ha-ha funny stuff in this one, just more the reality that it would really suck to be that cold and have no other options. Like I'm okay with never going on an Arctic expedition myself. I'm good. Thank you so much for watching. I hope that you enjoyed this book. Next month we will be back with another actually written by K.A. Applegate book, and then I think we're into like a long string of ghostwriting stuff, so that'll be interesting. It'll be The Attack, which sounds very good fun, and I think puts us at halfway next month, which is very exciting. So if you haven't already, subscribe so that we can watch that together, or read that, and then I can tell you about it in video form. That's what this is. It's all good. If you do want to chat about Animorphs, I don't do comments on these videos because it's too much, but I do have a dedicated Animorphs channel on my Discord if you want to come chat there. You can also follow me on social media. I'm there as well, doing my thing. Thank you so much for watching. That's all from me, and I will see you in the next one. There's gonna be some bloopers now. However, this Jason, Jeremy, what's his name? Love, please stop scritching on the floor. I adore you, but please no. Will you stop flicking at me? You're in book jail. Big stretch. Hey, honey. I'm making a video at the moment. I don't have a treat for you, but you can sit here. You're gonna make gross noises, aren't you? I'm so sorry. Are we done? Did I not provide enough entertainment? You're not here for Animorphs content.